Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Senate K-12 Finance and Policy Education Committee. It is February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, 2022. And it is 3:10. It is my fault we are late because I forgot something upstairs and we had to go get it. I forgot my computer and some other stuff. Just as a reminder, members, again, until we're fully used to this, always keep your computer F1, completely mute, no matter what pops up on the screen. All right? I think that's all the little business we have. Good to see Senator Isaacson, everybody here today. And we have 4 bills on the agenda. In my opinion, they're fairly short and simple. So with that, we will start with Senator Gazelka, Senate File 2575. Senator Gazelka, it's been some years since you've been in that position. So I'm honored that this is the first one I think you put up.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we were talking on the floor, and I said, you know, since I was leader, I haven't been in this position through the whole pandemic, so it's kind of fun.
We'll guide you through it. It's very, we'll get you through it.
I think
so anyway,
remember.
Senate File 2575, and just so you know, that computer right now on your left, that's getting your profile, so you could move it over if you want in front of you. But
it shows
okay
me
and
then the testifier.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chair, Senator Isaacson, I think both sides are really pretty good.
Well said, Judy, well said. Okay, all right, Senator Gazelka, I don't notice any amendments, and we'll be making a motion on your bill later. Senator Gazelka, go ahead, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will have 2 testifiers too and try to keep it in a timely fashion, but really this is something that as traveling around the state and talking to people, a frustration. I can't say it's everywhere, but enough stories from frustrated parents that I thought I need to take a look at this. And so the first thing I did is check to even see if there was a statute that talked about parental curriculum being available to the parents. And sure enough there was, but it really wasn't clear. And so the bill I have before you tries to bring some clarity. I will tell you that parents feel like they're shut out of the process when they want to be engaged. They want to know what's going on. And if there's any silver lining to the distance learning and what happened to our education system, is a lot of parents had the opportunity just to listen in and learn with their kids what was going on. And as a result of that, a lot of families, parents, were frustrated with every direction and they didn't know what to do about that. And so as I took a look at this bill, then what it does is the curriculum needs to be available without cost and immediately upon request to the parents. If they find something, and this is already in statute, if they find something that they just don't want to participate with, it could be particular books that they want them to read, it could be something related to sex education, it could be something related to history, then the school needs to work with them to find an alternative path for that student. So that's already in there. But the way this would work then, schools must notify and inform the parents of this policy at the beginning of each school year. They can do it via email, they can do it over United States mail, but there has to be a notice so that parents are aware that they can be involved. And I think the end result that we'll find is that every school will get better. I think whenever the parents are engaged and they're working with the teachers, working with the school administrators, that particular school district is going to get better, and they're going to be a better reflection of the families that are in that area. It's not prescriptive about what can or can't be in the school. It's just simply saying we want the parents involved when the parents want to be involved. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I have 2 testifiers. If you want to do that first and then take any questions, we could go from there.
Yeah, we'll go with the testifiers first. Thank you, Senator Gazelka. So there's room for them both. I show 2. Angela Zierden and Kendra Kaduff. Is that right?
Kaduff, thank you.
Oh, what do we got? Oh, I'm sorry, Betsy Armstrong as well. I'm sorry. Thank you, Greg. So it's Betsy Armstrong, Angela, and Kendra Kaduff. So first Betsy, and then, I should say, first Miss Armstrong, then Miss Zierden. Okay, and then on deck is Kendra. Thank you. I think I got it.
Actually, on deck is Betsy Armstrong.
Okay, so she's next, and you're Miss Zierden? Okay, all right. Just testify. Tell us who you are.
I'll do my best.
State your name first.
Sure.
Tell us who you are, who you're with, and welcome.
All
to
right,
the meeting.
I am Betsy Armstrong, and I am a mother and a grandmother, an attorney, a former school board member, and also a citizen advocate for the parents and stakeholders in the Minnesota School District. Mr. Chairman and committee members, and especially Senator Gazelka, thank you for the opportunity to speak about the amendments to the Parental Curriculum Bill, SF 2575, offered by Senators Gazelka and Duckworth. And you stole one of my lines.
That's how it works.
Order.
Yeah, there was a silver lining to the COVID-19 pandemic. For the first time, parents were able to observe in real time what their children were being taught as they attended school online for these past 2 years. And it was an eye-opening experience seeing what their children were learning, but also the information to which they were being exposed. Some of those lessons and information were not what the parents had expected as they remembered their own time in school. Unfortunately, some of the material was ideologically based and not in line with the parents' personal values or that of their community. Parents in America have always put their trust in schools and in their children's teachers. I know I did when my 4 kids attended our local Minnesota public schools. Expectations were that whatever was taught would be honest and accurate, providing a solid foundation upon which to pursue additional education or head off to work, and generally just be successful in life. For the most part, that has been a wonderful success story here in Minnesota. But the academic landscape has been subtly altered over the last few years, awakening a sleeping giant of your constituents, the parents and concerned citizens. We are not domestic terrorists, as some government officials have described us, as we testify in front of our local school boards. We are deeply passionate about our children's education, and sometimes we become a little angry about the direction that education is going. Though mandated by academic standards, that direction is guided by curriculum. Senator Gazelka's bill is the first step in ensuring that parents have the absolute right to review all curriculum that would be used to teach their children at no cost and immediately. Now, that's plain language that we can easily understand, but what do we mean by all curriculum? Importantly, that means content. The actual words and images that are in textbooks, supplementary materials, whether purchased by the school or the teacher, curriculum maps, online classes, a daily agenda, apps, PowerPoints, videos, in-classroom libraries, and such. Parents want to know what is actually in those materials. The news is replete with concerns of parents that critical race theory especially, and questionable gender diversity policies have crept into the curriculum. The amendments made by this bill are bipartisan answer to those charges as they proactively tell parents what their rights are regarding curriculum review. Some parents have complained that they didn't know that they could examine the curriculum. The bill adds language for notification to the parents at the beginning of the school year by a variety of means, and that the policy will be included in the official handbook or the official school policy guide. This will eliminate claims from parents who say that they were uninformed about the curriculum. They will have the right to review it before it's taught and voice any concern or objections. Schools will now be able to respond to a complaining parent that they had the chance to control their child's education by exercising the rights provided in this bill. I urge you to adopt the amendments by passing the bill. Doing so shows your constituents that you are working for them and for their kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Armstrong. Next up is, Senator Coonish. Oh, Senator Coonish, go ahead. Ms. Armstrong can have a seat again.
Yes, ma'am.
Senator Coonish has a question.
From some of the parents that I have talked to, I think that what they're afraid of mostly is social studies, and as we know that there is a proposed revised social studies standards, and some of them I think may have been confused about what's being taught now and what's being taught in the future. And I know that there are some teachers who emphasize social studies information a little bit differently, and you've probably heard of the 1619 project. And I haven't heard anybody say that that's a particular curriculum that they know that's being taught now, but I know that there's a fear among the parents. And the thing about the 1619 curriculum is that it was not designed by a historian, and a lot of the, if you want to call them professional historians, are saying that that's not accurate history. And it kind of gets into this critical race theory. And what people are mostly afraid of with critical race is that we're going to be becoming more and more divisive, even more so than we are now, because you have an oppressed group and you have a victim group. And instead of being based on class, like it was with traditional Marxism, it's now based on race.
Follow up, sir?
Yes, Senator Coonish. Senator Gazelka had a comment.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Coonish, one of the parents I talked to said, as an example, there was required reading, and they gave them a selection of 3 or 4 books, and all 4 of the books really had kind of the same message, which would have been different ideologically than where they thought they wanted to teach their children. So that would have been an example of knowing the curriculum. And like I said, I think this should be at a local level, because it's very possible in one school where material was considered okay by the parents and the school board may have been different in a different school.
Thank you, Senator Gazelka. Senator Coonish, you had a follow-up. Did you get your mic on?
I did, thank
Okay,
you.
all right, thank you.
Sorry. So apparently you're feeling that we need to be preemptive of anything that might be taught in the future. And that for whatever reason, parents were not fully informed about the curriculum that their students, or the information that they were being exposed to. And you seem to have some uncomfortableness with CRT, which is, a really high-level graduate, almost a doctorate sort of thing to study. I'm wondering if you have any examples, or you know of where specifically, and maybe you can explain for everybody what CRT is, and then second of all, if you are seeing that is taught at, elementary, middle school, high school level?
Critical race theory actually did start at that higher level, but what people are afraid of is that it's coming down now to the K-12 level. And what's happening with critical race theory now is you hear the euphemisms which are equity and social justice, diversity and inclusion, culturally responsive teaching. That's happening right now. If you take a look at the curriculum in some of the schools, especially down near the cities, you're going to see those words. You see organizations that are popping up all the time now that have that emphasis toward critical race theory, especially between the equity and equality. And I'm sure you understand the difference between equity and equality. Equality being the opportunity for a child to be successful, and equity trying to guarantee the outcome. And we can't really guarantee the outcome because of the difference in children's educations and their backgrounds, and also just the quality of the the teachers in their school too.
Follow up, Chair?
Thank you, Ms. Armstrong. Senator Coonish, one more, then we'll go to Senator Isaacson. Thank you.
I guess we're going to have to agree to disagree on that definition of equity and equality. I myself was a teacher for 25 years, always in very diverse communities. And so all of those words that you say, diversity, you seem to be so, and maybe others, and pardon me, I don't mean to address you that way, but those are not words to be afraid of. Those are not theories to be afraid of. Equity means reaching those children where they need it. If your community needs clean water, and the community next to you already has clean water, equity means making sure you have those resources so that your community has the clean water, and that means that the community next to you that already has clean water doesn't need those resources. So equity is more about providing the resources so that every student is successful. So I would, folks that seem so afraid of those words or are trying to be preemptive of putting in rules for something that hasn't really happened, I would be very, very nervous about that, because you don't know what's going to come down the road, and you can't fix what's not there. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Coonish. And I would, I guess I have just one quick question for Senator Gazelka. My reading, everybody's going to have a different take on it, but my reading of the bill is in short, just a sunshine law and access. Could be anything, could be math classes, could be anything. So it's a sunshine law. So Senator Gazelka, your proposal here, does it mention social studies or CRT or any class in particular?
Yeah, correct, Mr. Chair. I mean, the focus is, I think the more parents are involved in their kids' education, whether it's public, private, homeschool, the greater the chances are of success. And in the public school right now, Minnesota is no longer that shining star. We're mediocre at best, and for minority students, we're way, way down. And so I do think one of the critical components is the more we get parents involved, the better. And parents are getting involved right now, and we're trying to figure out how to navigate through that. But having them be involved by knowing what's going on in their school and wanting to communicate with the teachers and the administration, I think is really important and will drive success.
Thank you. So we had one more question from Senator Isaacson for
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Armstrong.
I'll wait till after with the testifiers.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Ms. Armstrong, thank you.
Yes,
Next
thank you.
up is Angel Zierden, and then on deck is Kendra Kaduff. She's on Zoom, so. All right. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record. Make sure you get that mic close to you. That's your job, Senator Gazelka. It's a long time since you've been over there.
All right, thank you,
All right,
Mr. Chair.
thank you. Welcome to the committee. State your name and who you're here with. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Angel Zierden, and I would say that I'm a political activist, mother, and business owner. This last year, I had the privilege of meeting with not only parents, but school board members, curriculum directors, and it was pretty eye-opening for me. I got a chance to ask them questions and get answers that normally we wouldn't get, mainly because the communication between parents, school board members, administrators, has been, that trust has been lost. So I want to share with you some of the feedback that I've received from all parties in relation to curriculum. I think it's important that it's not just one side, but how it's viewed from other positions within education as well. So for parents, it was clear they wanted curriculum transparency and to have access to the materials used in the classroom. A lot of schools right now, they do post online. They post the classes, they post the books. They're working towards that, especially in technology, which is why funding in that area actually is pretty critical, so that they have more access to be able to post those kinds of things for parents to review. And I think with this bill, with curriculum transparency, what it does is it gives the school district, or holds the school district more from accountability standpoint, so that when they give parents the information on where to find their children's materials, that they now can say, we've done this, we've told you where to find it, and now it's a parent's responsibility to go and be a part of that education, which is so critical. For school board members, it was kind of a mixed bag. They face challenges with threats and dealing with dynamics of divisive politics within the board itself, which has really taken away from their opportunity to work with community members and parents who have come into these meetings. One of the biggest things too within school boards, it should be a nonpartisan position, and it's not. And so it shows how long that this has been rooted from a political standpoint within school boards for years. This should be about our children, which is nonpartisan, and it's not, and the school boards do feel the effects of that, given that, they can't get a teachers union endorsement unless they answer the questions the way that they want them to politically. And again, this does affect our children's education. For teachers and administrators, especially curriculum directors, this has been a really interesting conversation I've had with them. They are asking for more leadership and support from the Minnesota Department of Education. They feel that, years ago, Minnesota MDE had boots on the ground. They were working inside of schools, they were working with administrators, they were working with teachers, they were providing better training, and that is just not happening anymore, and this is coming directly from curriculum directors that I have spoke to around the state. As far as that, it's also the funding, right? I mean, the funding for them, they need better salaries, higher access to quality training, and funding allocations in area of special education, PE, arts, and technology. And again, this allows for teachers to be able to do their job the way that they want to do their job and provide children with the best education possible. So I do see that it's not just, this is a very complex problem. And some of the feedback I guess we have gotten is, oh, well, this is just this isn't going to solve the problem. Curriculum transparency, well, this isn't going to solve, it doesn't matter because it's one step forward in the right direction. And I think the first step, the absolute first step for Minnesota and our people is that we have to rebuild the trust between our parents and the school districts. And this is one small step in how we can do that by giving them the information that they're asking for, which is just to know what their children are learning in school so that they can be a part of their education. And maybe COVID really was a silver lining because it allowed for parents to be more involved who probably wanted to be involved but just haven't, and now moving forward, maybe they will be more involved in their child's education moving forward with that information. I also think, too, even if this is passed in the Senate, it still has to go to the House. So I have a message for the House. I hope they're prepared to put political differences aside and work together with the Senate, because none of what we bring forward is going to actually make change unless the House can come together with us, because this, again, should be a nonpartisan issue. And education is so critical. It is critical to reducing crime in Minnesota. It is critical to improving our economy. It is the foundation of this state. And if parents want to be involved in their children's education, they should be given every opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zierden. I don't see any question. Senator Isaacson?
I want to wait. Are you done with testifiers? I don't want to, are we good?
We have one more from, I think, Education Minnesota's.
Why don't I go ahead and wait, and then I'll go first.
Thank you. So, thank you, Ms. Zierden. I hope I got that right. So, next up and final testifiers, Ms. Kendra Kaduff. I was looking for you on Zoom here.
Yes, I'm right over here.
There you are. Okay. I welcome the committee. Please state your name and who you're with for the record, and you may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senate committee members, for allowing me to share my testimony in regard to the components of this bill. My name is Kendra Kaduff. I am a current resident of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been a special education teacher, a reading specialist, an instructional coach for teachers in the Farmington School District, and I'm here to speak from my perspective of over 20 years of experience. The state of Minnesota already has comprehensive supports for parents. Our statutes 120B 20 already provides for a curriculum review process and for alternative education in the event that a parent has a problem with materials at that parent's expense, of course. This is something I've witnessed myself. There's never been any pushback from allowing alternative education when there has been a difference in perspective. This bill seems to be a solution in search of a problem. We'd like to know what does it mean when we add the word immediacy to the statute? And is the expectation that this requirement would take precedence over in-person teaching? I feel like this, with maybe the best of intentions, actually puts in place a lot of obstacles for educators who are already overwhelmed with trying to keep up with our duties and with our student needs. So parents already have, we feel, statutory protections in place, as well as the informal ones. We always welcome parents to connect with us. We hold, during conferences, a lot of times we have sessions for parents to help them understand the curriculum and what the overall goal is. Parents do reach out to us proactively, whether they agree or disagree, and that is welcomed and appreciated. And teachers do modify their lesson plans as needed. We feel this bill is unnecessary, and we do ask for this committee to not support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kaduff. Did I get that
Chair?
right, by the way?
Can I give one brief response?
Okay. Yes, Senator Gazelka, then Senator
Thank you,
Isaacson.
Mr.
Go ahead.
Chair, and to the Education Minnesota testifier. The goal of this bill is to create a cooperative relationship between the parents and the school administrators, teachers, et cetera. But if there's an adversarial role, then the goal is to make sure that that parent can get the information and that they're not charging them too much. Those are two of the things that I heard, was that they weren't getting the information or it was at an exorbitant cost. And so that's why the tweak to this statute is there. But the goal is to create a cooperative relationship between the parent and the school.
Thank you, Senator Gazelka. Senator Isaacson, that was the last testifier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Gazelka, for bringing this bill forward. A couple questions for you, and I think you just addressed one of them, but I want to maybe go into that a little deeper. I'm just interested in knowing, A, where parents have ever been denied information about their kids' curriculum, and B, in what circumstances would that cost them money?
Senator Gazelka?
I just want to make sure we're not confusing that with Freedom of Information Act, because those are two different things, where that does cost money.
Mr. Chair, Senator Isaacson, I don't have the exact location, but it was to the tune of like $9,000 to get the information because it was too expensive or they didn't want to give the information to the parents. And so that theme I've probably heard of half a dozen or more times just in different places that I've traveled. And so that's where this is coming from. And that's why I say the goal still is cooperative, not adversarial. But without a doubt, parents are frustrated and we have to be aware that thousands and thousands of parents have been leaving with their kids public schools in the last couple of years. And so we need to pay attention to that. And I think if they feel like they're being heard and there's some working together through issues that they're concerned about, I think we can alleviate a lot of that.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Isaacson?
Well, for the sake of the discussion, if what you said was true, right, I would share your concern as well. However, I can think of numerous times where I've been in committee presenting information, and when asked to verify or explain or provide data for what I'm talking about, if I was unable to, that was pretty much rejected out of hand. And I get what you're saying. You're out there, either you're talking to parents in the campaign, whatever's going on, and you're having conversations, but I think it would behoove us to have some specific examples, because if that is indeed the case, for sure that should be addressed. But I just have never seen or heard of that ever being the case, and I can't imagine as an educator and then as someone who has become, as the first testifier talked about, intimately involved in my kids' schooling because I had to relearn how to do math and that kind of stuff, which wasn't fun. I'll tell you that I just can't imagine that being a stumbling block. I feel like parents being involved and understanding in how much, at least the teachers, and I know it's an N of one, but this is anecdotal like yours, I can't avoid being engaged with what my kids are doing, with the amount of contacts and stuff, but that could just be a product of my school district, right? Mr. Chair, I have a second question.
Yeah, Senator Isaacson, go ahead.
So let's pretend, for example, that, Jane parents out there, they want to get the curriculum and they find something that they don't like. What happens next in your mind?
Senator Gazelka?
Mr. Chair, Senator Isaacson, if there's a roadblock, the whole idea is to go back to what the statute always intended, that there's a conversation with the parents and the teacher or the administrator about what is the next step. For example, I gave the example of having to choose from 3 to 5 books on a particular topic that the teacher wanted to teach about, but the parent recognizes that all of those books have a particular bent that they would rather not teach that portion. So then they find an alternative curriculum that they can do. That would be an example.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Isaacson.
So let's go back to the testifier, the first testifier that came up to support your bill.
Ms. Armstrong, yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Do you think the words diversity and equity are negative, divisive words in our education system?
Mr. Chair, Senator Isaacson, I'm not going to debate which words are aligned to CRT or not at this point.
Right.
I would look at the actual curriculum and the example and give me an exact example of what you're talking about, and then we can have a conversation.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Isaacson.
So the reason I ask that is there appears to be a real significant amount of disinformation or misinformation about what CRT is and how it's actually approached, if it is in schools, which I've never heard a high school teacher talk about before. And I think my concern is that when we think about the examples that I've seen anecdotally, like in conversations with my friends across the aisle or, in commercials or TV or whatever, is this idea that somehow, like in Florida, they wanted to have a bill that would make white people not be made uncomfortable because
Well,
teach about
look,
slavery.
look.
No, I'm
We're not talking about Florida and what they're doing and supposing that is what we're interjecting here. I'm going to just say this, and we're going to end this, is that.
Mr. Chair, I'm in the middle of a question. That's not appropriate.
So let's leave the conjecture out of it. Take the bill at its face, Senator Isaacson, and that is simply at no cost. It takes existing statute at no cost to the parent so they can have, and then positively advise the parent of that they have that right. That's all this is. It's not talking about any particular course or any particular class or any particular language. So that's where we're at. So I'm sorry, Senator Isaacson, continue.
Mr. Chair, I understand what you're saying. I'm literally just going off the testimony that was provided in support of the bill. That's all I'm doing here. And I'm not presuming to say that you and the Florida bill are together. I understand that it's not. My concern is that when we talk about diversity or the kind of things that I've heard from your testifiers in terms of what is being taught, right? And having a good understanding of that, being uncomfortable with learning about that isn't a reason to not learn about that. And my concern is, and that's why my very first question kind of framed it, what do you see happening after that happens? Because my concern is that we don't have a situation where a parent is uncomfortable because they don't believe something happened, whether it's the Holocaust, this, going to the moon, climate change, whatever, and then they want to say, well, we're just not going to teach that. I would never expect a teacher not to teach that, right? And I think it'd be irresponsible of the teacher to say, I'm not going to teach that. And so my concern isn't that your bill is necessarily going in a bad direction, but the possibility of where it could really go down some dark paths is present. And I hope that's something you'll think about as we move forward.
Senator Gazelka, I'll give you the last word, and then we're going to wrap up.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator Isaacson. Mr. Chair, you had a number, I think it's something like 20,000 kids or whatever. It's a huge number of kids whose parents have decided they don't want to be in the public school system. And if that trend continues, the public school system will be in deep trouble financially. And so that's where I'm saying this is an opportunity for the school systems to listen to the parents. And I think too many are frustrated that when history is taught, they don't feel like the kids think that they're any longer part of the greatest country in the world. And we are part of that. We talk about the flaws, but what about what we learn from the flaws? And so that, I think, is one of the core things that I do hear a lot of. But even this bill doesn't address that particular. We're allowing the parents to be engaged with that local school to find the solutions for that local school. And that's possible that could be different in one school from another school, but the parents are involved, and that's the greatest indicator of success that we can have for our kids.
Thank you, Senator Gazelka. So, thank you for the question, Senator Isaacson. But Ms. Zierden had mentioned trust. This morning we talked about partnerships, Senator Benson and others. These proposals, the one in front of us is already there. It just says you have to tell them. So the language you're talking about is already in statute. But parents simply, I think with the transparency and the effort that we're trying to make here, is to improve that trust, to improve our schools, to improve the relationships and how they move forward. I don't know if it was Senator Gazelka or one of the testifiers talked about is just that, relationships and improving the system. Right now, a lot of parents are frustrated and upset. That can't be denied. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but try to build the communication and rebuild that trust so we improve our schools. It's just what we were made aware of is that there was a problem in the system. And what's happening now is attempt to correct the problem, and we're trying to referee that so that we have a soft landing and we can reconcile the two sides. That's what we're trying to do here. So the bill, I think, is pretty plain and straightforward in that. So I thank you for the discussion. And Senator Uyghur, you got 2 minutes, because by God, we're being out here at 4:30 today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had several comments, but I'll ask Senator Gazelka first. Have you reached out to the state PTA or any of its 200 chapters?
Senator Gazelka.
Mr. Chair, Senator Uyghur, not at this point.
Senator Uyghur.
Mr. Chair, I would strongly suggest that. I do not feel there's this groundswell malaise throughout Minnesota of this complaint. Are there issues? Yes. And should they be addressed? Yes. And there's statutory protections in place as provided in the MSBA handout. And it does require the District Advisory Committee. It does provide this type of interface. And if it's not working, then that school board should be held accountable. The point, though, in your, I know you had 30 seconds, on the point of the cost, if that should be addressed, then we should do something about that, because one should get this type of access to information. The word immediate, that means with no delay, and if someone at the end of the day asks for a bunch of information, et cetera, I think reasonable needs to be interjected. There's also a local impact cost, and I would I support the concept of full transparency and of the statutory protections in place, but I think it could use some additional work, and I really would like to get the PTA's comments on record for this. So those
Mr. Chair, if I could just one quick comment, and I know we're done, but Senator Uyghur, if you're not listening to the many parents around the state, I mean, it's thousands are leaving. We don't have to wonder. That's actually happening. And I think the biggest reason is because we are not listening. And so that's what this is about. It's forcing that relationship to improve between the parent and their school boards and administrators and teachers. And everybody in this room wants education, our kids to be educated the best they possibly can and be successful. But it is thousands of kids. This is a huge shift, and if we're not listening, we're all in trouble.
Thank you, Senator Gazelka. Thank you, Senator Uyghur. Like I said, this is simply trying to referee and reconcile an issue. I'm sure, I mean, you said, you know, we're not opposed to letting the parents know that we had the policy. This just says, parents, it's here. If you need it, let's talk. Let's work it out beforehand. So with that, Senator Newman moves that Senate File 2575 be approved, sent to general orders, and recommended pass.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Uyghur.
A question?
Yes. Yes.
A question procedurally on the referral. If there's a local impact for, you know, we talk about mandates sometimes, the local government, and if there is a potential mandate, which this would be, and there would be a cost, and I understand it, I just spoke for that in terms of providing. Does this need to go to finance to review the fiscal impact as it relates to the local school district?
Senator Uyghur, members, it was asked. There's no state cost to this. There might be some local costs, but as some had said, it's partially there already, so we can, no fiscal note is required for this. It's transparency for the parents, and they pay the taxes up here and down there. So I'm going to renew, Senator Newman renews his motion. Senate File 2575 be approved, sent to general orders, and recommended pass. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay? Nay. Okay. It's approved. Senate File 275 is going to the floor. Thank you, Senator
Mr. Chair and
Gazelka.
members, it's a privilege to have my first one before you.
Did you have something to finish there? Senator Benson. So next up is Senator Benson with Senate File 2666. And Senator Benson has an author's amendment here. So what we'll do first is we'll just get that passed and you can explain what it does, all right? So it's author's amendment A1. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? A1 is adopted. So, Senator Benson, what's that amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Senate File 2666, as amended, is before you. It requires a class syllabi to be posted and available electronically to the parents in the classroom and to the students in the classroom. Why is this an issue? Well, again, an anecdote that will not please Senator Isaacson. A mom asked for a fifth grade reading list.
Quit picking on Senator Isaacson. Go ahead, Senator Benson.
A mom requested a fifth grade reading list. Roseau, Minnesota, she just wanted a list of the books that the fifth graders were going to be reading and was told she didn't need it. Well, clearly, all of us in this room agree that when a parent entrusts a child to a school, that parent has every right to know what goes on during the time the child is in that building. And so making a curriculum available is just part of the acknowledgement that parents are the primary educators of their children and from year to year have responsibility for the development and the success of that child. And so making a syllabi available to the parents is very much in line with honoring the parents as primary educators. Additionally, parents need to be partners with teachers for the success of every child in our school. And having a syllabus available would let the parent know if their child was keeping up or falling behind, or what the child had to look forward to in that classroom, or an understanding of alternative books that the child could choose. Because as every parent knows, sometimes your child comes home from school and says, they're making me do this. And if you could look online and say, did you ask about this alternative book? Then you can actually resolve a problem before it turns into something much more difficult, and you can help work on that student's success. And so that's what this language would do. Put a syllabi electronically available to parents and students, and when material changes are made, that syllabi would be updated for the benefit of the child in the classroom and the parent who is partnering with that teacher. And with that, I did ironically receive an email after our press conference this morning, a parent who had a special needs child, autism, and the child was supposed to be in a class called Personal Finance Investment as a high school senior. And the mother, in this case, wondered why her child was coming home talking about dodgeball in so many cases. And so asked for a syllabus of what was going to be accomplished in the class through the course of the year, and was given a non-response from the teacher. When the parent, this mother, went to the principal, was told, well, we'd probably never find out why the teacher was having dodgeball as part of a personal finance investment class for a high school senior. And so had the mother had the information available earlier, she probably would have acted earlier, but there would have been some accountability as to what was coming home for her autistic child every day in his personal finance class. So, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Senator Benson. We do have one testifier, Ms. Kaduff, again.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome back to the committee. Please state your name and who you're with. And camera, please.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yep. Sorry, I forgot
There
I
you go.
closed that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So again, thank you, Mr. Chair and Senate committee members, for allowing me again to share my testimony in regards of this bill. My name is Kendra Catoff. I am a current resident of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been a special education teacher and e-reading specialist, as well as an instructional coach for teachers in the Farmington School District. I'm here to speak from my perspective, with over 20 years of experience in our public schools. With all due respect, the person who drafted this bill seems to have no idea what our schools and teachers do. I do not create a syllabus in a vacuum. As teachers, we have to respond to the individual and unique needs of sometimes more than 30 kids in a classroom, for each classroom that we have, especially in the secondary. And there is no world in which I know exactly what's going to happen in class 2 weeks from now, let alone 9 months from now. So I think this means that we are responding to the needs of the children in our classroom instead of ignoring where they are. I know day to day, I am adjusting my lesson plans for the needs of my kids who are there, different things going on in their lives. The fact that I would have to post exactly what I'm covering for the entire year ahead and then update it as needed, I would be updating constantly. And I think that is unreasonable to ask our educators to do. This is yet duplicative of our statutes 120B20. Parents can just call their teachers. They have these rights. They only need to ask the teachers who will gladly share. If there are these situations where people are being told they don't need to know a reading list, that seems unusual, and that can be addressed through the school administrator, as it should be. But I don't think that is the norm that would require any kind of change in our statutes. So I would ask, I would ask you to understand that this is the hardest on our elementary teachers. They teach entire subjects through the day, all subjects, and then special education teachers as well. We draw our materials from a variety of sources. It would be, again, unreasonable to ask us to put those things together for someone to review. We can talk to parents who have those concerns for sure, but I don't think it needs to be a standard that is put out there. This proposed amendment would require us to issue every time we have a change in the pacing for our entire class. That's not what's best for students, to take away our time. I don't know when we would have time to do this amount of work, additionally, this amount of work as well. We have a lot of differentiation for our students, so we're also not talking about one size fits all lesson plans. So that's another situation where this just doesn't make sense in the teaching world. It would be more burdensome for already burdened special education teachers whose lesson planning is usually tied even to what the general education teacher is doing. For example, a teacher working with students with learning disabilities is likely working on math and reading interventions that are tied with what the regular education teachers are doing. So their syllabus will change not only day to day, but literally from one student to another. And this requirement is the starkest for our SPED teachers, but also any teacher who's trying, again, to meet the individual needs of our students. So again, your committee will spend time on Wednesday discussing the teacher shortage. Survey after survey shows special education teachers specifically don't leave the profession because of their students. We leave because of the paperwork load, and this bill will drive even more teachers from this profession. And we ask again that you do not support this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Catoff. So we got 3 people want to ask questions. We're going to keep it tight and quick. Senator Benson, if you could answer these quickly and tightly, that would be appreciated as well. So first up, I had Senator Isaacson, and then Coonish, and then Senator Swedinski.
So,
Isaacson.
Senator Benson, in the spirit of bipartisan working togetherness, let's just go into that cone just for a second here. And I'm going to assume the best of intentions, which I know are always what you have when it comes to education. And let's pretend like you have an issue you want to solve that relates to making sure the teachers know something. From the perspective as an educator, when I put my preps together, and I teach college in full disclosure, so I know it's not the same, but my syllabus is set up as what I call a living document. And what that means is that because each class has its own pace and its own spirit and style, my pace may not match the calendar, right? And so what I tell my students is an incentive to be in class. If you want to know changes, you got to be here, and then you know the changes. If you're not here, that's on you for not showing up to class. The reason I say it isn't because I think that's how we can do high school and junior high, because I know that's not the same. But I do know that classes do take on a life of their own. And so what I would suggest when looking at a bill like this is how can we find a way to be flexible that gives the parents what they want to know, which is what you really want them to have. I don't think you're trying to say specifically A, B, and C. You're saying, what is my class going to cover without as being prescriptive as you're talking about? Because I think the prescriptiveness that the previous testifier spoke of, it's a real problem. And if you had me adjust my, I would literally be spending a half an hour arbitrary class adjusting syllabus, because one day we'll just get into a discussion that's really fascinating that I didn't expect, and it takes us longer. Other days we get through stuff faster. And so I think that when you think of this bill, having a discussion that would say, I want to know, like in the college courses, again, I know not an apples to apples comparison, but this is a field of what we're going to talk about. Having that same thing here is a good idea. Understanding again, though, the unanswered, coming back to the more realistic side of this, the unanswered question that both yours and Senator Gazelka's bill asks, once that's done, what do you envision happening next? And that's where my biggest concern is, because I don't know that a teacher should have to change curriculum because one parent doesn't like that they're going to read a book that they don't think is appropriate, like George Orwell's 1984 or something. So I think that's my concern, is that if you're going to proceed with the bill, how can you make it happen in such a way that doesn't become so burdensome that it really defeats its own purpose?
Senator Benson?
Mr. Chair and Senator Isaacson, I think the difference between a lesson plan and a syllabi is important, or a syllabus is important. Are we covering, are we taking a test every Friday in math versus are we covering fractions in the first semester, moving to complex fractions in the second semester? Two totally different things. And a syllabus is something that would talk about what textbook we're using, maybe techniques, you know, if there's a particular modality that would be incorporated, because if you have a child who is a visual learner, but everything is going to be spoken in class, you would want to know that. But are we going to cover fractions and be done by November and then pick up complex fractions after Christmas? Would be very helpful to parents to give some sense of what's going on in the classroom. And then what happens once this is published? Parents could, well, I know in my case, sometimes your kids need something to look forward to. Say, yeah, you're not going to like this part, but this part's coming and you'll like it. Or out of this list of books, these are the ones we've already read in our house. You should choose something else. Or if you're having a struggling year, choose something we've already read in our house, and that would make your year easier for you if you're struggling in some aspect of the class. So I see this as a very useful tool for an engaged parent.
Okay, Senator Isaacson, you got a quick one, because I want to move to Senator Coonish.
I think there might be a pedagogical disagreement on how you're defining syllabus, lesson plan, and what you perceive that's happening in those that goes forward. And I would encourage a longer discussion with teachers and administrators about how to make that, because I don't think it's as clear as you're stating it as, with all respect.
Thank you, Senator Isaacson. I'm sure, as we say in this business, willing to work with folks, right?
And Mr. Chair, I'm happy to take technical advice. I had operated under scope and sequence. That is not the language that's in the bill. We can talk about that too.
So Senator Coonish and then Senator Swedinsky. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Benson.
no.
I know, I'm still kind of getting myself, this is only my second, third committee hearing. So I have a couple of questions, and I think it's absolutely imperative that parents know what their students are going to be learning or what they are learning in order to, be able to enhance as well as support or even do a little bit of pre-treating, teaching for their students when they know that something's coming up. And so that is absolutely important. As you know, I got my teaching degree from St. Kate's, your alma mater, where they did excellent instruction for me as a teacher. And one of the things that we learn in our methods and methodology at St. Kate's is to look at, and you just mentioned it, the scope and sequence, or the standards that we are teaching our students. And I think maybe what we need to do is just educate our public and our parents, because that is all public information. That's all public information. You could contact your teachers in teaching and learning and ask them for that information. You can go online and Google library media specialists, library media standards, and scope and sequence, and you can find all that information. It's public. It's already there. And as far as looking at like the specific levels or the specific items that are taught, especially now that everybody has been online for 3 years, every school district has software that they use to communicate with the students and the parents. So for example, Schoology. I don't know if your student, I don't know if you have young children, but Schoology is one that we had to teach our parents and our students how to use, so that teachers can show what the lesson is going to be, what the assignment is, how to submit that assignment, and then it also allows the teacher to give feedback. Every parent has the
Senator
opportunity
Coonish,
to create
did you
a
want to come
portal.
back here at 7 o'clock? Because we're on pace to a 7 o'clock return here, so.
Well, this is
legislation. I want to give you.
We're making laws here that are really important.
I want to give you time, but please ask a question.
Okay.
Please ask a question. You know that's not how we run here. Please
I'll
ask a
ask
question.
2 questions. First of all, do you really think this is necessary when all of these platforms are already there? Schoology, Seesaw, Clever, all of that is actually right there and accessible to the parents. And then my second question, just to say, this is for K-12. Do you think that this ought to be extended into colleges and universities as well, so that parents that are paying for their students for higher ed also have this opportunity?
Senator Benson, you got a couple of
Mr. Chair,
answers.
Senator Coonish, I consider adults different than children. If your 18-year-old would like a syllabus, they are responsible for asking for it. And if you as a parent want to know what's going on in college, you should ask your 18, 19, 20-year-old. They're adults. You should talk to them. These are minor children who are still under the purview of their parents, and parents have an absolute right to know what's going on in the classroom. And with respect to scope and sequence, if you can Google it, that's even more reason to have it here, because then you can say, okay, teacher, you posted this learning path, and are you on track? Because if it's just Googleable, then it's not actually a standard, and it's not something that you can expect for performance in your classroom. So that makes it even more necessary.
I would just have to say that that does
Coonish?
not make any sense.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Benson.
Over the last several years, test scores in Minnesota have fallen. If something you can Google is actually the standard in our classroom, then we have bigger problems than are apparent by our test scores right now.
Thank you, Senator Benson. Just quickly before we go to, thank you, Senator Coonish. Before we go to Senator Swedinsky, Senator Uyghur had a question that he put in the chat about the definition of syllabus. It's a good point. I certainly believe we'll work on that too. So thank you for the question. Senator Swedinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to summarize the last hour of my life by saying our public schools are dependent upon parents already. Our parents bring the Kleenex supplies, they bring the pencils to us on the first day of class, they pass referendums, they volunteer in our classrooms, they have bake sales so we can send kids to Washington, D.C. and such places. So no one up here is wondering about, and then with respect to what Senator Coonish said about the openness and transparency, we already have, and she mentioned the learning management systems. Parents can go already and look at everything they need to know in any class, but in particular in social studies classrooms. The thing that made the magic happen in my 33 years in the classroom was the teachable moments. And so my question is why you took out the 20% formula on line 20, because I kind of thought, well, that's a nice compromise with teachers like me that sought out those teachable moments, because I don't want to date myself too much, but when the Berlin Wall came down, that wasn't in the syllabus. It wasn't part of my curriculum, but nonetheless, I'm going to teach that because the kids were curious and they were, in some respects, scared about their future. And when Clinton was impeached, and when the election of 2000 and the Supreme Court decision, and on 9/11, none of those things were part of my syllabus. So I'm just wondering, with the last couple bills, how would teachers that want to teach that stuff that makes the class come alive and the teachable moment, and the kids have these questions, they just want to know what's going on in their world, and if it's not part of the syllabus and the curriculum and the standards, because we're in uncharted territory, because we're at war, or whatever may be the case, what kind of world are we handing our kids when we don't accommodate what they need to know at that moment? And I'm guessing every parent in the state would encourage us to be doing that, regardless of the partisan politics. And one final comment, both these bills, and I know this committee is big on no mandates, but both of the last bills, the last one says must notify, and this one says must make. So both bills mandate to the schools things that we as a committee have been trying to steer away from. So sorry about that little rant. I've been holding off for a little while, but I would appreciate a comment about why you, the author deleted the 20%.
So quickly, thank you, Senator Swedinsky. So I'd say two things. Social studies, your syllabus would say current events. We'll discuss current events when they arise. Secondly, the cost of this. Many have already made the comments. There's a lot of stuff there. So I imagine most professionals are creating some sort of syllabus that creates a framework for the discussion. And we're asking for a syllabus, which we will define, and then create that framework in the syllabus, not necessarily all the changes in the lesson plan. So I think we're trying to be too clever by half our intent. I won't speak for the senator, but my belief is the intent is to partner, share information the best you can is the intent here, not to, if you change a word or a conjunction or something, that gets, you have to take time and do that, but the intent is work with the parents, do the best you can to get this updated, but just to let the schools and the parents know that this should be done so the parents can have something to evaluate. So Senator Benson, got a quick comment, and then we're going to
Mr.
move
Chair,
your bill. Close her up.
The 20% is it by letter count. It's very hard to, in something that is qualitative, not quantitative, to have a 20% reduction. But importantly, at the bottom of page 1, starting on line 22, to accommodate pace of advancement, topics of interest, and other pedagogical reasons, is in the language, respecting that there is an art to teaching. And we require some flexibility based on truly developing circumstances in history classes and in civics classes. And so that is the reason for that flexible language.
Thank you, Senator Benson. Members, I appreciate the conversation. Senator Benson, you want to give a final comment or two?
Mr. Chair, I know you are out of time. We'll have final comments if we bring this bill to the floor. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for your time.
Good. Okay.
And I respect the questions. You've made my bill better. Thank you.
So Senator Duckworth moves that Senate File 2666, as amended, be approved, sent to general owners, and recommended to pass. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Ayes have it. It's going to the floor. Thank you, Senator Benson. Next up is Senator Eichorn. Senate File 2909. We have an amendment, an author's amendment with this as well, Senator Eichorn.
I do, Mr. Chair, just a A1 amendment, and hopefully make this bill go a little quicker. Getting rid of a lot of it, so. The amendment, Mr. Chair, will just delete basically page 2 to the end of the bill, keeping just page 1, then on page 1, line 11, it'll add, or it'll delete in custody of, insert enrolled in, and then after district, insert or charter school, so. The amendment is simple, strips most of the bill. We kind of talked about everything that would be in the back half of the bill in Senator Gazelka and Benson's bill, so I did not see the need to keep it in this bill, Mr. Chair.
All right, so this is an author's amendment, but since he gave the explanation, basically keeps the first page and deletes everything after section 2 on page 2. So Senator Senator Isaacson.
I'm sorry. I was having a quick conversation with Senator Benson. I don't think I quite understood what we're doing. Can you just walk me through it one more time real quick?
Yeah, sure. So this is an author's amendment, and basically what the author's amendment is doing is deleting everything from section 2 on page 2, all that other stuff behind it.
2.1 on.
Yeah, so you're basically keeping the first page, and then as Senator Eichorn mentioned, deleting in custody of and putting in enrolled in. So a couple little changes at the bottom, but basically everything after page 1 goes away. So all in favor of the author's amendment A1, say aye. Aye. Nay. It passes. Okay. So Senator, with that, Senator Eichorn, what's left of your bill, and you may proceed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate File 2909, as amended now, is a simple bill that reinforces fundamental rights of parents to direct their child's education. Parents aren't an afterthought in a child's education, and this bill will empower them as they guide their children through school. It states school districts must not withhold information about their child's well-being or education, and requires that school districts have a regular system of notifying families of school activities. Children deserve the best education possible, and a parent is the child's first and most important teacher and advocate. We need to empower parents with resources to guide children's education, no matter where they live or go to school. A parent's right to direct education should not end at the schoolhouse door. If we want to improve education in Minnesota, we need schools that are transparent, accountable, and give parents a seat at the table. Transparency and accountability are 2 pillars of good government. The purpose of this legislation, as amended, is to clearly specify and send a message to parents, school district, and the courts that parents serve as the primary role when it comes to the upbringing, education, and care of their children. Senate File 2909 does not create new parental rights, but rather recognizes these rights already exist by nature and in common law as well as positive law, such as multiple statutes that currently empower parents to make decisions affecting their children. And I had a little more, but I'm going to leave it at that, shorten my section because I know you are on a time limit, Mr. Chair.
Sorry to be I hope I'm not impatient. So thank you, Senator Eichorn. Senator Isaacson.
Mr. Chair, was that a rhetorical question about being okay, anyways. So, Senator Eichorn.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
Senator Isaacson.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, two things.
I can help you out. He likes the bill.
Yeah, that's it. 2 things. One, either A, you're writing a bill telling us to follow the rules we already have, or B, you're solving what problem? Because if I can explain my question a little bit first, nothing you said here isn't already true on every level. And if it isn't true in one spot, it is absolutely the anomaly. The amount of mail and stuff I get every day from my 3 kids from 2 different schools is a bit overwhelming, and I wish they'd reel it in a little bit. The amount of time I spend as a part of the curriculum and understanding like what my students are doing, my kids are doing in their classes, along with the weekly updates I get all the time, is amazing. I cannot possibly for the life of me understand why we would try to pass a bill telling us to follow the rules we've already passed in law. If anything, this is redundant at its very least. And so I'm just really at a loss unless there's some reason someone can illuminate for me why we would do this or what problem it's solving.
Senator Isaacson, you want to give that a quick answer, then we have a couple of testifiers for you, okay?
Mr. Chair, would you like Senator Isaacson to answer, or would you like me to answer? I knew what you meant, Mr.
No,
Chair.
go ahead, Senator Eichorn, quickly.
I will say that this is something I've heard about from folks in my district, that this isn't being done. Maybe it's being done in your district, and I'm thankful for you that that is happening in your district, but I don't think it's happening in all parts of the state. And that's part of the reason we got rid of the rest of the bills. We don't want to make a mandate. We're just clarifying what is already there, again, so parents and school districts know. And so that way it is encouraged that what is already in law will continue to be followed, because, again, in some places it is not.
Thank you, Senator Eichorn. So we got Ms. Carlson. Did you want to testify you on Ms. Carlson? All right, Ms. Carlson.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Please state your name for the record and let us know who you're with. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Renee Carlson. I serve as General Counsel for True North Legal and regularly engage in matters pertaining to parental rights. I'm here today in support of Senate File 2909. Parents' rights to direct the education of their children does not end when a child goes to school. But is that true in Minnesota? History is telling. Over the last decade, state agencies and related subcommittees, as well as school boards and administrators, have created policies that undermine parental rights. Consider these few examples. Minnesota State High School League's decision to allow males to play on female sports teams, despite significant parent testimony opposing the board's changes. The Minnesota Department of Education's implementation of the transgender toolkit over much parent objection. The Public Educator Licensing Standards Board, lack of transparency with regard to changing teacher licensing standards and cultural competency as statutorily defined. The practical implications of these decisions are policies that circumvent parental notice in matters relating to physical and emotional health, discipline students for acting consistent with various religious and moral upbringing, teach students about sexuality and how to obtain contraceptives without parental knowledge, and allow teachers to use curriculum that would be considered pornographic in any context outside of diverse literary content. Equally concerning are the decisions by courts across the country, including Minnesota courts, that infringe on the firmly established constitutionally protected rights of parents. Courts have long recognized the constitutional right and responsibility of parents over their minor children, especially in matters relating to their child's education and upbringing. Yet, schools in Minnesota have starkly departed from the U.S. Supreme Court's near 100-year precedent that the child is not the mere creature of the state. Those who nurture them and direct their destiny have the right, coupled with the high duty, to recognize and prepare them for additional obligations. That's a quote from the Supreme Court. Years later, in further recognition of this right, the Supreme Court observed that, quote, parents possess what a child lacks in maturity, experience, and capacity for judgment. Minnesota law also recognizes and upholds this long understood right of parents. Minnesota's regard for parental rights is clearly evidenced by one of the strongest educational opt-out laws in the country, as well as state statute that requires parental involvement in education. But the spirit and intent of the law has fallen on deaf ears in many places across the state, and these court decisions and the laws that we have now simply are not enough. Schools have continued to pass egregious policies inconsistent with clearly established Supreme Court precedent regarding the role of parents in the upbringing of their children. Unfortunately, the U.S. Constitution, the Minnesota Constitution, and the Supreme Court have become secondary resources for many decision makers interpreting parental rights laws in this state. This leads to policies that contradict the law, often marginalizing parents who do not champion a school's belief about gender confusion, implicit bias, general disparities, and sensitive family life issues. Even greater tensions exist when a school's actions directly contradict parents' moral teaching, often based on strong religious convictions. I assure you members that this bill is not based on hypotheticals, and the need for this bill is not based on simple anecdotes. In the last 2 weeks, I've received inquiries from parents representing 5 different school districts across the state, including a request from 50 parents representing over 100 students concerned about a policy that the school plans to adopt, which allows students to change their sex and determine their gender identity without parental consent if it is the school that determines that telling the parent would put the student at risk. Unfortunately, the school showed little regard, if any, for these parents' concerns, including Muslim parents who do not speak English, insisting the law requires the school to adopt this policy. You spoke of teachable moments. Well, how about this? Another parent informed me that her child's teacher shared matters about her personal sexual preferences during class and encouraged students in various forms of sexual experimentation. The parent's email to me said, and this drives the point home, I will drive clear across the country for help. I will do anything for my child. These are Minnesotan stories. They matter, and there are many more of them that I could share with you if we had a lot more time, but I'll finish here. Understandably, we know that schools face many complexities in our culture. Moreover, schools have a legitimate interest in the education, health, and safety of children that will one be adults in our society and in our great state. However, when schools decide to circumvent open meeting law, disallow or severely limit public comment, administrators will not return emails, and the Minnesota Department of Education, along with other educational organizations and school attorneys, counsel schools to implement policies that blatantly violate parental rights, the legislature needs to act. To be clear, legislation recognizing the supremacy of parental rights is not a partisan plot to micromanage schools and teachers. Such claims significantly devalue the commitment of parents to their children. Rather, this legislation is a response to the erosion of parental rights in our state and the current policies that only drive a wedge between parents and schools. Therefore, members, we strongly encourage this committee to pass legislation that restores rights to parents to decide what is best regarding their children's education and upbringing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson. Senator Isaacson wanted to say something. Do you want to do that now, or do you want to wait after the other two testify? Good. We have two, yeah. All right. So next up is Ms. Zierden. Are you still here? Did you want to testify again? I don't think she is.
Mr. Chair, I think she was here for Senator Gazelka's bill. She may have accidentally signed up for both. I'm not sure.
All right, thank you. So then, Ms. Kaduff, welcome back. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did you need to testify since the amendment's off? Did you want to say something, Ms. Kaduff?
Since the amendment's off, I will forego this one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Senator Isaacson?
Mr. Chair, just respectfully have to say I disagreed with almost everything the last testifier had to say. Second, I have an amendment I'd like to offer.
Okay.
That was in light of our conversation, right? That was from 11 to 5. I thought you'd appreciate that.
Senator Isaacson?
I just want to move, and I'm not sure where we should do an oral amendment here, that MDE is in charge of education. Then I want to say the next line is that the legislature shall distribute money for education, and that teachers are mandated to be the teachers in the classroom. I mean, just since we're stating things that are already true, I want to make sure we state a couple other things that are equally as true so we can remember what all portions of this are, because the first part of the bill is clearly just restating things that we already know are true, so I want to add a few more things that I think are true also.
So you had an oral amendment?
Yeah, just want it, wherever you think it would go, and I'm up to the council to decide where we talk about.
What was the oral amendment again?
Just MDE is in charge of education in the state of Minnesota, administering education policy, that the legislature shall appropriate the money for education policy, and then and that teachers are responsible for managing their classrooms. I mean, these are three things we already know are true, and I think it's just in line with what the rest of the amendment's doing to make sure that we just really make sure everybody's clear about that so we don't forget.
Well, I'll let Senator Eichorn respond to that, but briefly, I'd just say that I don't think that's all true, Senator Isaacson, but I get the point. I don't know if it's going to work, but Senator Eichorn, you want to make a comment?
I'll make it simple. I decline the amendment. I would ask members to vote no on it. If Senator Isaacson wants to work on this between here and wherever it goes next, I would certainly be willing to do that. It's hard to do this on the fly with voice stuff, so willing to work on that as it moves.
Okay, Senator Isaacson?
Mr. Chair, I think that my point of this is that never in my very brief stint in the legislature have I ever seen someone write a bill to help us remember what other bills we've passed are and then what laws are. I mean, I think that I just don't get that. I don't think to write a bill like this, Senator Eichorn's suggesting that what this is saying contradicts something that's true in public, that these things aren't happening, and that's just simply not true. Contrary to the last testifier, that's just not true. These things are already true, what the bill is talking about. So it doesn't make sense that it goes forward. I'm kind of at a loss, but I'll withdraw the amendment not to make it more complicated. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Isaacson. Senator Coonish, did you?
I do. I just need some clarification on the bill. Senator,
Eichorn?
Eichorn, pardon me.
It's okay.
There's a lot of E's around in the Senate. This last paragraph on page 1, starting at 1.16, I understand the first part where it says the state of its political subdivisions and other governmental entity or any other institution must not infringe on the fundamental rights of a parent to direct the upbringing, health, well-being, mental health, and education of the parent's minor child without demonstrating that the potential infringement of parental rights is reasonable. So this is where I get confused. I don't know what this means, where it says, without demonstrating that the potential infringement of parental rights is reasonable and necessary to achieve a compelling state interest. Not quite sure what that compelling state interest means, and that the potential infringement of parental rights is narrowly tailored and is not otherwise served by a less restrictive means. So those last, 3 sentences or 4 lines, I have no idea what that means.
Senator Eichorn, did you want to take a stab at answering the question?
I was asking staff for help, and it might be helpful to have staff response, but it's written in a way in which the courts sometimes write these things. To speak to your other point, it could be like a child protection case or some other type of issue. Mr. Cook was explaining it to me a little bit, but it's kind of legalese, gets into the weeds a little bit.
So if I might jump in here a second, it's standard language, understood to be standard common language and interpreted as such okay.
That's the understanding I've got, Mr. Chair.
Senator Coonish?
Well, I would like to know what it means, because as a state legislator, it's my responsibility to know what the laws are or what the legislation that we are going to be putting forward actually means.
Senator
I don't know
Eichorn?
how we can go ahead without fully understanding the full impact of the words, because words are very, very powerful, and we know that.
Senator Eichorn? Did you want to?
Eichorn?
Your brother's by a different mother, somebody's told me.
All these eyes.
So Senator Eichorn, do you want to comment? Otherwise, I got a thought.
Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
To me, it's common language. Compelling state interest is health and safety of that child, just as we have in law about duty to report. I think Senator Coonish, you're familiar. If a child comes in school and it shows evidence of abuse in one way or another, then the state has a compelling interest to protect the health and safety of that child. So it would be along those lines. The state and all of us would understand that the health and safety of that child can come into play. We want parents to be ultimately recognized as having absolute right to be informed and advised and full participants in the child's education. But there are cases, obviously, where there's abuse at home or other places, and I think that's the compelling state interest. Compelling state interest is to balance the parents' rights with the safety of that child in the end. So do you accept that?
I still don't know what that means. I still
Well,
don't know
then
what it
we-
means, and until that, we have really clear understanding, I think we should not move this along until it's very clear, not just for myself, but for everyone.
Yeah, and lucky Senator Eichorn, you're going to civil law with this bill, so they can further define that and parse all the words that they want. So it's going to go to civil law from here, Senator Coonish, to address that issue specifically. I
Mr.
only
Chair.
pretend to be a lawyer, but I'm not. Yes, Senator Coonish.
Oh, no,
I'm
Mr.
sorry, that
Chair.
was not me. I'm
Oh.
done. Thank you, though. I could go on if you'd like.
Was that Senator
I
Eichorn?
apologize, Senator, Mr. Chair. I can answer that for you, but I'm in the Zoom world. I have been
Oh, I
trying
see.
to raise my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Ms. Carlson, go ahead.
That's okay. Mr. Chair, Representative Coonish, I can answer that for you just briefly. It's language protecting the legal standards of the highest rights. It's the strict scrutiny standard. So any fundamental right is measured against strict scrutiny, and that's just simple language from the court.
Okay, thank you for that, but we're going to have to close it up here. It is going, thank you, Ms. Carlson. So I understand people still have some questions. I'll just close by saying this is about, yes, there are things that are being done. A lot of schools do good work, a lot of educators. This just affirms that absolutely in statute. It's not unusual for this sort of language to be in statutes or constitutions to convey the interest and the idea and the intent of legislative bodies and how business is conducted. So with that, Senator Eichorn, you have a final word?
No, I'll stop there because I know we're beyond our time, so.
Yeah, so
mindful of that.
with that, members, Senator Newman's going to move this one, Senate File 2909, as amended to be approved, sent to general orders and recommended, I'm sorry, approved as amended and sent to Senate Civil Law Committee and recommended to pass there. So, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, so it's going to civil law. Now I'm on deck, and members, you'll be happy to know this is very easy and everybody loves it.
Okay, Senator Swadzinski. I couldn't help it. I got messed up about 4 or 5 times, so I couldn't help it. Senator Chamberlain, go ahead.
All right. Very good. We like levity. So members, Senate File 2729, we have been talking about parents' affirmative rights to be accepted absolutely as the guardians and the nurturers of their children, to be absolute and without question. And we've had several bills here today to try to address that in a positive way, and as others have mentioned, in a partnership to try to hopefully improve and reconcile the difference between parents and the school board and some educators to hopefully prevent some problems in the future and get the trust back, as one of the previous testifiers had mentioned. So in that vein, what we have here, Senate File 2729, and that simply says school boards or charter school boards are prohibited. The language simple: the board must not require a person providing testimony at a board meeting to disclose the person's address or other contact information. We do not do that in the Minnesota Senate or the House. If we need their address, that is done, and contact information that is done behind the scenes to ensure, well, for this case, for schools, that parent resides in the district. They can control that and have a process to control that. So we just say they don't have to disclose that publicly. I think that's fair, that's reasonable. Are most school boards doing it? No, but some have, and it has, of course, been brought to our attention, as noted by a district in southern Minnesota, who if you don't want me to name it, I won't. I'll just keep quiet for now. But there was a district that happened in, and we're just here to kind of make sure it doesn't happen again. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have one testifier, and then we'll go to questions. Looks like Ms. Caduff, again, if she's still online.
I am.
Okay. Go ahead, just state your name for the record again.
Yes, absolutely. Again, thank you, Mr. Chair and Senate committee members. My name is Kendra Caduff, a resident of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been a special education teacher, a reading specialist, and an instructional coach in the Farmington district for over 20 years. As a teacher in Farmington, I'm fully aware of how heated school board meetings can become. We've seen it all across our state, unfortunately. And at the end of the day, the school boards are accountable to their constituents, not people from other districts or other states even, which has been reported to occur. Increasing our ties to the community actually is a good thing. I might ask why I'm required to provide my name and my contact information to testify before this committee, but it would be inappropriate to do so at a school board meeting. Almost half the members of the Minnesota Senate require a person to provide their address in order to email them, including some members of this committee, Senators Chamberlain, Eichorn, Duckworth, Uyghur, and Swedzinski, and Isaacson. So I assume this is not to limit public discourse at all, but because as elected officials, you are responsible to your constituents. School boards have that same responsibility. And again, I urge you to please not support this bill.
Senator Chamberlain.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ms. Caduff. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this bill does not say they can't ask for the information. It's vital, but we don't, the testifiers that came up here today, we didn't say, please state your name and address for the record. And by the way, give us your phone number and email address. We don't do that publicly. That is done by the committee administrators behind the scenes quietly. It's not a public disclosure. So it's not that we don't require it or ask for it. We just don't ask for the people to state that publicly. So that's all that this does. Just respects the school, it keeps the school board's right and process intact, and it protects parents from that potentiality as well. Just makes it clear in law.
Senator Chamberlain.
Yes, Senator.
A school board can still ask for that information, that's correct?
Yes, they can still ask for the information. They just can't sit here in public at the microphone and say, give me your name and address.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Isaacson?
Yes, Senator Chamberlain, my bad. I'm unclear because what it says here requires that they don't have to provide testimony at a board meeting, or they don't have to provide their personal address information, contact information, but you're saying that if they want to testify, they still have to they can still be verifying that they're constituents of the school district to the school board on a private level. Is that articulated somewhere in law that would balance this out? And if not, would you accept an amendment to do that down the road?
Mr. Chair and Senator Isaacson, always willing to work with people to make sure we're clear on what we're doing. But the way I read this is the board must not require at a board meeting to disclose at a board meeting, and board meetings are public. So that's the point. If it's at the board meeting and parents are present, then it's a public hearing that they usually have. So I guess it's understood, unless you want to put language in there to clarify that it's at a public board meeting regularly held.
Senator Isaacson?
Well, joyfully, using the standards set by Senator Gazelka, Benson, and yourself, sir, I can tell you that anecdotally, on several occasions, we've had people in different school districts testifying on bills that they were not living in that school district. And so I think it'd be really important going forward that if you're going to do this, which I actually don't know that I disagree that publicly they have to state it, but they have to prove that they live in the district before they can testify. That, I think, has to be established somehow, and I'm not sure that it does that here. And so I think that maybe it's just a semantical difference in how we're reading the bill, but I think that's an important clarification so that people understand you don't just come into somebody else's district and testify and blow the whole thing up just because you don't like something if you don't have people living in that district, paying taxes in that district. So I hope that that's something we get to rectify.
Senator Coonish?
Thank you, Chair. And much what I was going to speak to is what Senator Isaacson has done. I think, yes, I think that there is some work that needs to be done on this statement, because as I read it, it it tells me that they don't have to tell you, anybody or anyone, what, who you are or where you live. Thus, as Senator Isaacson illustrated, just about anybody could walk into your communities and, say all the kind of stuff. I could walk into your community, you could walk into mine, and start messing with our school board or our community. But I think what you want to do is, where it says the board must not require a person providing testimony at a board meeting to publicly disclose the person's address or other contact information. So it's more of a, I don't want, I prefer not to tell you my address and all my personal information to the public, but I don't mind, submitting some kind of a form that says I live in this district and I have grave concern about the things that are happening. So I think that this needs to do some more work, and just as you said, I would be happy to work with you and Senator Isaacson and make sure that this is really clear and still allows parents and community members to communicate their support or their consternation when it comes to school board.
Senator Chamberlain?
Thank you, Senator Coonish and Mr. Chair. Right, so boards already have a process to do that stuff, and we leave that to them. That's good. They should have a process to do that, to ensure that those citizens are in the district, or if they have some other thing they want to do to work that out. But perhaps the council had suggested, similar to you, Senator Coonish, is that after, on line 1.12, after 2, we could do it there, or what we should do is after 2, on line 1.13, before disclose, add publicly. So it would read, at a board meeting to publicly disclose the person's address or other contact information. So if that's agreeable with everybody, I would accept that.
Mr. Chair, there is one other place on the back that has very similar wording
correct.
where you may want to also add it. That would be on line 2.6, after 2 and before disclose, also add publicly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, correct.
Okay, so Senator Chamberlain has an oral amendment to, after line 1.12 and before line 1.13, after the word to and before disclose, to add publicly, and on line 2.6, after the word to and before disclose, to add publicly. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion does prevail. I have Senator Newman next. Senator Uyghur?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Chamberlain, is it your intent that this go to civil law?
No, this does not have to go to civil law.
Well, that would be a suggestion, Mr. Chair. I believe this impacts the open meeting law, and it seems like there's two different levels of understanding. We're talking about one at a board meeting where you don't have to disclose your name publicly, but what if a person refuses to do that? What if they've made some threatening statement at a meeting? What if there was something that was slanderous? I chaired a school board before I came here. We had to call the police on people. We saw people's lives threatened and slanderous statements made. Because we are only taking a few minutes on each agenda item, there's not enough time to really dig into enough questions. Yeah, publicly disclose is okay, but I think it needs more work.
Mr. Chair, Senator Chamberlain, we did ask nonpartisan counsel, and they did say that it did not need to go to any additional committees. So if you wanted to respond to Senator Uyghur, go ahead, and then Senator Newman has a follow-up.
And then thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Uyghur, and we still have this amendment on before us. But, right, civil law didn't ask for it. Others, nonpartisans and other staff has said it doesn't contain anything to deal with civil law. And if someone's in criminal activity, that's criminal activity. That's not our jurisdiction. I would agree, but that's criminal activity. It has nothing to do with this committee or this bill.
Senator Newman?
Mr. Chairman, the amendment that is, the oral amendment's been offered, resolved any questions that I had on this. And I would just remind the committee that there is a very similar law in election law whereby the Secretary of State is required not to make public the address of certain mail-in or absentee ballots under certain circumstances. And this bill strikes me as being very similar to that particular law. So I really have no problem with this at all.
Senator Chamberlain?
Yeah, just quickly, right. I mean, ultimately, what we're doing here, members, is protecting the rights of, protecting the citizens against any potential negative fallout, and also while still allowing the board to manage their meetings the best they see fit. So that's all I have.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Uyghur?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Senator Chamberlain, just so it's unequivocally clear, a school board may require the disclosure of a person's name and address.
Senator Chamberlain?
Yeah, I mean, I think we made that clear, Mr. Chair, Senator Uyghur. I think we made that perfectly clear that the board has the right to do that. We do that here. We just don't require publicly disclosing your address at the committee before the audience and everybody listening.
Closing comments, Mr. Chair?
Thank you very much. Simple bill protects the public and still allows the board to do its job. Thank you very much for the time and consideration.
With that, Senate File 2729
Wait,
is...
Mr. Chair, we didn't vote on the...
No, we got to move the bill. I was going to do that on your behalf, but if you'd like to move your own bill, you go right ahead, Mr.
We
Chair.
did not vote on the amendment.
We did adopt the amendment.
All right.
Did you want to move the bill, Senator Chamberlain?
I move Senate File 2729
As amended.
as amended, be approved, sent to general orders, and recommended pass.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed. The motion does prevail and is on its way to general orders.
Thank you.
Any other business? Seeing no other business before the Education Committee today, we are adjourned. Thank you.